Alright, so it's the YouTube. Yeah, I got a fucking green screen. It's lit. So now, like, you can see more. Like, as you can see. You feel me? So yeah, let's get into it. I don't know. I don't know. Fuck it. Just random ass recording. Might roll a blunt. I'm definitely gonna roll a blunt, but like, yeah. You know, I love animation shit, so I'm gonna get into that. I'm just go ahead and make me smaller. This is weird. Like I can move me. It's why I broke it. But yeah, alright, let's get it.
I'm an American guy who was teaching English in China. I'd been in China for a few years, and it was generally a good experience, except for this story. So, I had been sort of casually dating another expat until she decided to go back to her home country. We parted on good terms, but after a while, I was starting to feel a little lonely and decided to try a Chinese dating app, basically a Tinder clone. I quickly matched with a Chinese girl who went by the English name Jenny, living in the same city as me, but originally from another
This shit
province.
frozen?
After chatting for a while, we met for lunch. We really hit it off and wound up spending the day together 4 days in a row. That's when she said she was moving back to her hometown, but that she still wanted to be friends with me. I said that was okay, and kind of thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. We wound up chatting for hours every day at night after work, and in the morning before work. After about a week, she invited me to visit her in her hometown, and I accepted. On a long weekend, I flew into her hometown, and we basically spent the whole time in the hotel. The day before I was supposed to go back, I went out to buy a bottle of water from the convenience store downstairs. When I got back to the room, she asked me, "Who's Nancy?" Turns out, she had been using my laptop, turned on the VPN, and was browsing through my Facebook page, where she found a message from 8 years earlier to a girl I had been dating at the time. I told her Nancy was an ex-girlfriend, and she went absolutely ballistic. Said we couldn't be together because clearly I was actually in love with Nancy. Then stormed out of the room in
This
tears.
bitch crazy.
I ran after her, telling her that I hadn't even spoken to Nancy in at least 5 years, and that she, Jenny, was the only person I was interested in.
She lied.
She calmed down, came back to the hotel, and we ended the visit on a high note. About a week after I returned to Beijing, and still chatting for hours every night and every morning, Jenny sent me a text saying that she had good news. She was moving back to Beijing, and we could be together. She said she wasn't ready to move in with me permanently yet, but asked if it would be okay to stay at my place for a few weeks until she found an apartment of her own. I said yes, of course, and soon she was living with me. We were in love. I felt hard for her, and she for me. This is when the problem started in earnest. At the time, I shared the apartment with 3 people, 2 of whom were women. I worked in a language school for adults, and I would say that about 75% of the students were women. In addition, almost all of the Chinese staff were women, and about half of the foreign teachers were women. Anytime I so much as said hello,
They were women.
Wow, that was intense.
Women.
But
to a female roommate or colleague in her presence, she accused me of cheating on her. She once asked me if I liked living in that apartment because I could hear my female roommates peeing from the living room. The walls were ridiculously thin. Multiple times a day. And I would say that about 75% of the students were women. And soon she would calm down, came back to the hotel, and we ended the visit on a high note. About a week after I returned to Beijing, and still chatting for hours every night and every morning, Jenny sent me a text saying that she had good news. She was moving back to Beijing, and we could be together. She said she wasn't ready to move in with me permanently yet, but asked if it would be okay to stay at my place for a few weeks until she found an apartment of her own. I said yes, of course, and soon she was living with me. We were in love. I felt hard for her, and she for me. This is when the problem started in earnest. At the time, I shared the apartment with 3 people, 2 of whom were women. I worked in a language school for adults, and I would say that about 75% of the students were women. In addition, almost all of the Chinese staff were women, and about half of the foreign teachers were women. Anytime I so much as said hello to a female roommate or colleague in her presence, she accused me of cheating on her. She once asked me if I liked living in that apartment because I could hear my female roommates peeing from the living room. The walls were ridiculously thin. Multiple times a day, she would ask how many times I'd slept with students or colleagues. Never for the record. And when I said I hadn't, she'd angrily accuse me of lying to her. And I do mean angrily, by the way. Sometimes she'd throw shoes or other heavy objects at me before dumping me, storming out of the house with me, trailing behind, begging her not to go until she relented, and things would be good for the rest of the day, maybe 2 days on the outside. This cycle repeated for about 2 months, until I finally had enough, and one day when she left, I didn't go after her. That night, I paid for her to stay in a hotel on her own. The next morning, she called me in tears, threatening to kill herself. I went to the hotel to try to calm her down, and eventually she composed herself and seemed to have more or less accepted that it was actually over. So I accompanied her to a real estate agent so she could find an apartment of her own.
Good, because what the fuck? She toxic as shit. Nigga, damn.
Then I went to work. That night, she texted me a lot. The next morning, she texted me a lot. The next night, she was waiting for me at my workplace, and I told her I didn't want to see her. For weeks after we broke up, she was constantly calling me, texting me, randomly showing up at my apartment or workplace, and refusing to leave. Eventually, I blocked her on my phone and my WeChat, Chinese social media, account, and told the receptionist at work to watch out for her, because I was worried she might do something to cause problems at work. After a few more weeks, she seemed to have gotten the hint, and I was kind of hopeful that I could just spend some time single and try to get over her. That's when I received a friend request on WeChat from someone I didn't recognize. The name was unfamiliar, and the profile pic was an anime character, so there weren't really any identity clues. Like I said before, I work as an English teacher for adults. I don't mind adding students on WeChat so they can ask questions about English whenever they want. And I just assumed this was a student who'd gotten my account from another student or a staff member. And when I asked who it was, she basically confirmed that. She said she was a former student who had gotten my account from a British teacher and had a couple of questions about how American English differed from the British variety. No problem. Over the next couple of weeks, she'd send me a few questions every 3 or 4 days, occasionally making friendly small talk in between. Eventually, that friendly small talk seemed to be getting a little uncomfortably romantic, so I told her that I was still getting over a painful breakup. I was happy to be friends with her, but I wanted to be clear that that was it. She said fine, but she kept pushing the envelope a little more every time. She eventually told me that she was also getting over a breakup, and described a situation that sounded remarkably similar to my situation from Jenny's point of view. I was definitely suspicious at this point, but I thought I was being paranoid. I thought there was no way that anyone would make up a fake identity just to get back in touch with me on social media. It must be a coincidence. Anyway, after a little more chatting, this former student asked me if I wanted to meet her for dinner. When I told her no, she confessed that my suspicions were correct, that it actually had been Jenny the whole time. The next day, she showed up at my work again and started shouting at me while I was trying to teach a class. The day after that, I gave my notice at work and bought a plane ticket back to the States. She came to my apartment one more time before I left China, and I told her I was going home. In the first few months after I left China, she tried a few times to add me on WeChat, and once I unblocked her, we had a genuine chat where she tried to convince me to come back. Eventually, I did actually go back to China, but I didn't tell her, and it's now been about 6 months since the last time I heard from her, so hopefully it's all behind me now. I hope she can find some peace in her life.
Nah, she wouldn't catch you like
The Tektronix 6 Series B MSO goes beyond the expected to
a new bitch. Stay up.
Me and my friends Selena and Martha, Selena's sister Jasmine, and our common friend Emma, we are 5 in a group. One night at 7:30 p.m., we all decided to have a party at my house. My parents had gone out for an important meeting and would not return until the next day. All of us had decided to have fun. Martha had brought a Ouija board along with her. I asked her, "Why have you brought this with you?" To which she replied, we must include them in our party as well.
I mean,
We partied hard, and then at 12
does that
a.m.,
even mean?
we decided to play with the Ouija board. We placed the board on a table and lighted some candles. Selena started the session. "Is anyone there who would like to communicate with us?" Selena asked. There was no reply. Selena spoke again. "Don't hesitate to talk." Again, there was no reply. We got bored after asking 21 times and decided to watch TV instead. As the girls had stayed in my house for the night, they went to change their clothes. When it was finally Martha's turn to change, she went to the washroom. Suddenly, we heard Martha scream, and we rushed to see what had happened. Martha was crying, and she said, "I just now saw myself walking across the washroom at first." We didn't understand what she meant, and we thought she was trying to scare us. But then she showed us a scratch mark on her arm, which was not possible for her to make. We then thought to ask the Ouija board again this time. I decided to ask the questions. "If anybody is here, please tell us. Is anybody there?" Strangely this time, the board decided to answer back, "Yes." "Who are you?"
Oh, yeah,
The board
I know.
pointed to the letter D. "D who?" The board slowly spelled out the word, "Death." "What do you want from us?" "Blood. Your flesh as well," the board answered. And this was enough for us. We all left everything and ran towards the door. But the door did not open, and we realized that we had been locked in my own house. Some more supernatural things started happening. The lights were flickering, and things were being thrown here and there.
That's what
We somehow
dumbass
managed to
get.
hide in one of the rooms, but to no avail.
Stupid.
Martha got very angry, and she asked with a loud scream, "Why don't you leave us alone?" Selena, in frustration, burned the Ouija board with a gas cylinder. The moment the Ouija board was burned, the front door opened with a loud noise, and without wasting any time, we ran out of the house. But the thing that happened after that is the most horrible part of the story. We all got out, but when Martha was about to step out the door slammed shut. For a second, everything was dead silent, but after that, we heard her scream from the inside. We banged on the door and called out her name. After some time, our neighbors came, and we managed to break the door down. We found Martha lying unconscious on the floor. We took her to a hospital. After that day, Martha never spoke a word again. Later, we found that the spirit, whom we had called through the Ouija board, was David, who was Selena's half-brother. He died due to an accident. David was never good when he was alive or dead. Martha was admitted to an insane asylum, and even today, we don't know what exactly happened on that night. But whenever I look into her eyes, I get shivers all around my body, and I feel something horrible had happened. My family and I ended up moving from that house. Looking back, I have to ask myself the question, why did we do that? Because all of our lives have changed. I still feel a bad presence around.
Y'all ruined Martha's life. This bitch don't talk no more. She got scratched up. And she in the insane asylum. Whatever the fuck that's happening to you ain't shit compared to her. Fucking assholes. Playing with Ouija boards and shit. Where was your parents at, bruh? The fuck? Fucking idiots. Yeah. God damn, I'm so damn light skinned. I'm like, I'm hollow. You can barely even see me.
This happened one night when I was about 10 years old, around 1996. I'm currently 26 years old, but I remember this night vividly. We had just arrived in Warsaw, Indiana, to visit all of our family members, which consisted of my aunts, uncles, and cousins. My aunt and uncle's house is in the middle of the woods, where the closest gas station would take us at least 10 minutes to drive to. I've always thought their house was pretty creepy, but I never had any reasons to justify why I felt this way. By their house, about 50 feet away, was a lake where we used to go fishing when I was very young. After visiting with my family for about 2 hours, all of the adults decided that they wanted to go to a fancy restaurant and eat, while the younger side of the family, including me, wanted to stay home and play video games because it was very rare when we were able to see each other. All of the adults agreed that I was old enough to look after all of them, so they allowed us to stay behind. After about an hour of playing video games with my cousins, I realized that I hadn't taken a shower all day because of the long drive to get to Indiana, so I decided to go get cleaned up. After grabbing fresh clothes out of my bag, I told all of my cousins to stay in the room until I got back, because I was responsible for them. I went into the bathroom and turned on the shower and was waiting for the water to get hot.
I can't tell if this is
This
a boy or
bathroom was one
girl.
of the weirdest bathrooms I had ever seen. Inside the shower, there was a window that had a perfect view of the lake. Near the window, there was a large air conditioner. After the water had gotten warm enough, I entered the shower and just stood there for about 10 minutes because it felt so good. This is where my night turned terrifying. As I was taking a shower, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something move. I had that feeling that someone or something was watching me through the window. The hot water was steaming the window up, so I couldn't really see out of it.
Little girl.
I took my head and I wiped the steam off the window. What I saw made me drop my washcloth and made me freeze. I saw what looked like a man that was about 7 feet tall, with long hair, standing by the air conditioner right next to the window that led to the shower.
She
I
butt ass
couldn't move a
naked.
muscle. The man had very long hair which covered his face. He also had long fingers, and his nails looked like they hadn't been cut or cleaned in ages. His skin was a dark yellow color, the kind of yellow you see when you mix brown and yellow together. His eyes were a normal-looking shade of brown, and he was standing there, holding something, and watching me as I took a shower. I couldn't figure out what it was, but I think it looked like a flask, because he seemed to be taking sips out of it. As he stood there, I was scared out of my mind, but all I could think about was my cousin's safety, and that I needed to get to them. After about 2 minutes, the man got really close to the window and started to smile. His teeth were as disgusting as his fingernails.
Now he can
To this
see
day,
you.
I can still remember his face as if it had happened yesterday.
He's seen you
He
naked.
looked at me for about 30 seconds with his face pressed against the glass.
He's seen you
He
naked.
backed away and just sat on the air conditioner, drinking whatever was in his hand, staring at me like I was the only thing that existed in the world. The only
'Cause
thing
you're
I could
naked.
hear was his laughter and the water hitting my back from the shower head. I slowly used my left hand, which he couldn't see, to grab the towel off the rack. I quickly threw the towel over the window to hinder his view of me.
We all hear the stories in the news. The good guy
There's a
uses
big
a gun
ass
to protect his
glass
family
window.
from criminal.
in
You
the
think that
bathroom.
little ass towel
And I quickly ran to the room where my cousins were, with just my towel on, and told them to get out of the room and go to the back room and lock the door. The back room was the farthest away from the bathroom, and it was one of the few doors in the house that had a log. After they all ran in the room, I got the phone and called 911. I told them that a man was watching me through the window, and I was scared. They said they would be there as soon as they could. After getting off the phone with 911, I reluctantly went back into the bathroom.
What?
I slowly took the towel off the window, and to my horror, the man was still there.
Fucking
But
idiot.
he wasn't near my window or on my air conditioner. He was near the lake behind the house. He stared at me for about a minute longer with a malicious smirk on his face. By this point, I was terrified, but I knew my cousins were safe. Then, like he was being controlled or something, he quickly did a 180-degree turn and walked straight into the lake, his body descending until I could only see the top of his head. Then, nothing. He was gone in a second. I couldn't believe my eyes. This only made me more terrified. I just watched a man walk right into the lake like it was his home. I figured he would come back after a minute or so, but after 5 minutes, he never came back up. To this day, I can't explain it. The police came right after that, and they searched the area but they found nothing. I've never been more terrified since.
I mean, you were naked, staring at this dude, as he was staring at you. And then you walked back into the bathroom. I know you're a kid, but like, what the fuck? What the fuck? Like, what the fuck, dude?